Caitríona Balfe stunned the Outlander fandom when she announced a surprising piece of news about her longtime co-star Sam Heughan that instantly left fans speechless. The beloved Irish actress, who has shared nearly a decade of on-screen magic with Heughan as Claire and Jamie Fraser, revealed details that no one in the fan community saw coming. Known for their undeniable chemistry both on and off screen, Balfe and Heughan's friendship has always fueled curiosity, but this latest revelation took things to a whole new level. Balfe, who rarely steps into the spotlight to discuss her co-star's personal life, dropped the news during a recent fan event where the cast reflected on their journey through 8 seasons of Outlander. With the room filled with excitement, Caitríona's words silenced the crowd as she confirmed that Sam had been keeping a major development under wraps. While she did not go into all the specifics immediately, her tone made it clear that the announcement carried weight far beyond just another behind-the-scenes tidbit. Social media exploded as clips of her revelations circulated, sending the fandom into overdrive. Twitter, Instagram, and fan forums filled with speculation, theories, and emotional reactions. Some were thrilled, others were shocked, and many couldn't believe that Sam Heughan, who has always been notoriously private about his personal life, would let such big news finally come out through his co-star. The secrecy only heightened the drama, leaving fans desperate for more details and answers. Caitríona's announcement also highlighted the deep bond she shares with Sam. Their years of working side by side through grueling filming schedules, emotional storylines, and worldwide fame have built a trust that few co-stars ever achieve. It's that same bond that made her the perfect person to break the news, and the reason it landed with such impact. Fans quickly pointed out how telling it was that Balfe, rather than Heughan himself, was the one to deliver the surprise. As the story continues to unfold, the entertainment world is eagerly watching what Sam will say next. Will he confirm and expand on Caitríona's revelation, or will he keep fans waiting in suspense? Either way, the announcement has cemented yet another unforgettable chapter in the legacy of the Outlander duo. What began as a career-defining partnership has once again proven to be full of surprises, and fans are hanging on to every word. When you think of a Hollywood star getting into fighting shape, you probably picture grueling gym sessions or strict diets. But Outlander's Caitríona Balfe? Her secret is totally unexpected, and it might change the way you think about fitness. Let's dive in. When Outlander fans think of Caitríona Balfe, the image that likely comes to mind is Claire Fraser in corsets and bonnets, navigating perilous journeys across time and terrain. But as the series draws toward its grand finale, Balfe has embarked upon a radically different physical journey, one that involves ignoring expectations, sweating in the boxing gym, and discovering sources of strength she wasn't fully aware she had. Her transformation didn't spring from hype or a fad diet. Instead, Balfe's approach to getting into shape for her new role in The Cut brings together grit, curiosity, and a willingness to be a novice in a world that demands discipline. A new direction, a new role. In The Cut, Caitríona Balfe takes on the role of Caitlin, the partner, and in many ways, the emotional anchor to a retired boxer who is determined to reclaim his former glory. The film is not just about punches and rings. It is a psychological drama about obsession, weight, ambition, and the tangled dynamics of love and redemption. To portray Caitlin, Balfe knew she would need more than emotional nuance. She would need to embody the physicality of someone intimately connected to the intensity of boxing, even if she was not the fighter herself. I wanted to feel the physicality of what it was like to be in a boxing gym and to be a boxer, she said. Casting in The Cut marked a turning point. Rather than relying on her well-established reputation from Outlander, Balfe saw an opportunity to push her own boundaries, to learn, and to gain respect not just for her screen presence, but for her willingness to engage physically in a totally different way. Starting from scratch, lessons in humility and focus. Balfe came into training with little prior boxing experience, which she says turned out to be a gift. I had no idea how mentally focused you need to be when you're boxing, she reflected, emphasizing that the sport demands more than physical strength. It commands mental sharpness, presence, and a level of intent she had rarely experienced before. She began working with a boxing coach, Ruth Raper, in London, who guided her through the fundamentals: stance, footwork, punch mechanics, defense, pad work, and conditioning. Over time, the lessons expanded into rhythm, timing, and mental resilience, training as much for clarity of mind as for the jarring demands of the body. One striking difference she noted between her years on Outlander and this new athletic path is that whereas her previous preparation often involved costume posture, historical gait, and dialogue demands, her boxing training required an intense internal discipline. There was no veneer. Each jab and dodge had to come from understanding, repetition, and respect for the technique. Boxing was the thing that got me to the gym, she said, adding that she still practices it when her schedule allows. That speaks to another subtle shift. For Balfe, the boxing training wasn't just a momentary obligation, it became part of her personal regimen even beyond the film. A physical reprieve. She has been candid about her long years in Outlander, many of which were spent encased in corsets and bound by rigid period wardrobes. The toll on the body, compressed lungs, tight posture, and a sense of constriction was something she often joked about internally. In comparison, slipping into sportswear and climbing into a gym offered her not just relief, but a visceral refreshment. And she told Entertainment Weekly, working in the ring was undoing a lot of the corset damage. In that light, training became both a departure from her past roles and a form of reclamation for her own physical agency. Indeed, she viewed it as a form of restoration, exchanging constraint for expansiveness, posture durably shaped not by external force, but by internal intent. One of the most surprising lessons Balfe took away from training was the intensity of the mental demands, how boxing forced present moment awareness, accountability for each movement, and an acute sense of one's vulnerabilities. In Extra's interview, she explained how boxing required her to maintain razor-sharp focus. The mental demands of the training, how sharp and focused you need to be, it's amazing. She likened it to a meditation in motion, the constant interplay of stress, timing, physical reaction, and breath. That mental rigor, she realized, also resonated in her acting work. To perform convincingly in emotionally raw scenes requires an inner clarity, resilience under pressure, and presence in each moment. The gym and the stage, it turned out, share more in common than she suspected. Moreover, she acknowledged how exhausting it can be to carry emotional weight, not only in a fight scene, but in dramatic moments where character stakes run high. The boxing world became a metaphor, in many ways, for characters wrestling with internal pressure, lingering trauma, and the drive to exert control where they feel most powerless. A return to physicality, and first steps forward. As filming wrapped on Outlander, Balfe looked ahead to new opportunities. She has described herself as very grateful for her time on the series, having grown in unimaginable ways, but she's also relishing the chance to explore different genres and roles. The Cut offers her one such pivot, a role grounded in physical reality rather than time travel or period drama. Balfe also shared that her experience with boxing made her reconsider how she approaches fitness in general. It's no longer about appearance or meeting expectations, though public perception is unavoidable, but about discovering sustainable movement that challenges, sustains, and nurtures. In interviews, she often refers to finding the thing that gets me to the gym and making it part of her life. That shift from obligation to invitation is subtle but important. Training as a practice, not a punishment. What fans often get wrong. The public often assumes that an actor gets into shape through rigorous dieting, early mornings in spin class, or high-consequence transformations. And certainly, in many film roles, that is not far from the truth. But Balfe's story is different, and it challenges common narratives. She didn't chase a dramatic weight cut or a sudden six-pack reveal. She trained to embody a life. She didn't approach boxing with hubris, but with humility. She allowed herself to be a novice, to make mistakes in movement and footwork, and to rebuild from basics. She resisted shortcuts. She didn't rely on stunt doubles for all her physical scenes either. She stepped into the ring, she felt the sting of gloves, she accepted the soreness and the bruises. Over time, she earned small structural changes in muscle tone, core strength, agility, and confidence. When pressed, she has emphasized that she is not a boxing expert now, but she is a more grounded actor, someone who has experienced risk in physical form and can bring that lived awareness to her scenes. Caitríona Balfe's transition from Outlander icon to person in the gym is more than a career pivot. It is, in many ways, a metaphor for reinvention, for shedding what's familiar and stepping into uncertainty. Her boxing training shows that growth often happens in discomfort, in repetition, and in humility. It shows that physicality is not a cosmetic tool, but a language of integrity. It reminds us that actors, like all humans, carry bodies shaped by past roles, and that sometimes the most radical thing we can do is move differently, with intention. Her journey also demonstrates that strength is not just about external transformation, but internal alignment, accepting vulnerability, responding to challenge, and cultivating presence. In that sense, boxing is not just a sport, it is a lens through which she explores emotional truth, force, and restraint. As fans await the cut, they may anticipate seeing a different Caitríona Balfe on screen. Less corset, more gloves. Less Highland wind, more sweat and focus. But behind that image lies a multi-year, deeply internal journey, one that might not satisfy the usual expectations of getting into fighting shape, but which offers something arguably more lasting. Balfe's relationship with physical discipline predates both Outlander and The Cut. Long before she slipped into Claire Fraser's world, she worked as a high-fashion model in Paris and Milan. That career, too, required constant awareness of her body, but in a markedly different way. Runway shows demanded posture and aesthetic lines. Fashion shoots required long hours of poise in uncomfortable positions. In hindsight, she sees that time as a primer for discipline, but also as an experience that shaped her understanding of health in complicated ways. The fashion world, she has acknowledged in past interviews, often imposed narrow standards, many of which were unsustainable. With age and maturity, she has learned to prioritize vitality and functionality over superficial measures. Boxing, with its demand for stamina, resilience, and clarity, felt like a corrective to earlier notions of what fitness meant. The Outlander body versus the boxer's body. In Outlander, Balfe's body was often on display. Not in the way of action hero physiques, but through costume silhouettes, historical undergarments, and the intimacy of romantic scenes. Fans associated her with period beauty and strength under duress. Yet the work behind that was more grueling than glamorous. Long shoots in Scottish weather, heavy costumes, running through mud, horseback riding, and endless retakes. By contrast, The Cut demanded deliberate, functional physicality. She wasn't required to perform fight sequences, but she needed to project the lived reality of someone who spends hours in gyms, breathes in chalk and sweat, and carries herself with a subtle toughness. Achieving that required training that emphasized tone over appearance, rhythm over static posing, and mental engagement over muscle fatigue. Balfe has spoken about how much she enjoyed discovering boxing not just as preparation for a role, but as something that resonated with her personally. What struck her most was how empowering it felt to step into a traditionally male-dominated space and claim it as her own. Boxing makes you aware of your body in a different way, she said in a recent panel discussion. It's not about shrinking yourself. It's about expanding your capacity, how far you can move, how fast you can react, how much you can absorb. This shift reflects a broader cultural trend, women embracing combat sports not necessarily to fight, but to train for confidence, release, and resilience. Balfe's placement within that movement also highlights the specific challenges and rewards of learning it later in life while balancing motherhood, acting, and production duties. From Claire Fraser to Caitlin. For fans, seeing Balfe swap bonnets for boxing gloves was initially surprising. Social media erupted when she posted a behind-the-scenes clip of herself training, gloves on, sweat dripping, pad work sharp and deliberate. Comments flooded in, ranging from admiration to shock. Claire Fraser throwing jabs? But as word spread that her boxing practice wasn't just a gimmick, reactions deepened. Many praised her for challenging stereotypes of actresses who merely tone up for roles. Others saw her embracing boxing as symbolic, mirroring Claire Fraser's own resilience across centuries, albeit in a modern context. Industry voices were also quick to note the significance. Casting directors and critics highlighted her willingness to physically inhabit a new genre, while health writers pointed out that her approach aligned with a growing emphasis on functional fitness rather than appearance-based transformation. Her work alongside Orlando Bloom created an intriguing dynamic on set. Orlando's extreme weight shifts embodied the obsession and volatility of a boxer determined to recapture his prime. Balfe's steadier, functional training, meanwhile, embodied the counterbalance, strength through presence rather than through spectacle. Their contrasting regimens became a metaphor within the story itself, the obsessive pursuit of perfection versus the quiet cultivation of resilience. Balfe's preparation wasn't about eclipsing Orlando's physical transformation, but about grounding it. She gave authenticity to the world he inhabited, making it feel lived in rather than staged. As Caitríona Balfe steps into new roles beyond Outlander, her boxing journey marks not just a physical transformation, but a symbolic reinvention. She has navigated the corseted confines of period drama, the narrow frames of the modeling industry, and the expansive demands of television stardom. Now, she claims the space of the ring, not as a champion fighter, but as someone who values presence, resilience, and strength that isn't always visible to the eye. Her story challenges the way we think about actors getting into shape. It shows that fighting shape doesn't always mean chiseling away at the body. It can mean chiseling away at fear, distraction, or limitations. For Caitríona Balfe, it means discovering that gloves and footwork can teach as much about life as any script. And maybe that's the real twist. Her secret to fighting shape wasn't about becoming someone else, but about becoming more fully herself. Few television stars are as closely associated with a role as Caitríona Balfe is with Claire Fraser. Over 8 seasons of Outlander, she became the face of a sprawling saga that blended romance, fantasy, and historical drama. For more than a decade, Balfe lived inside the physical and emotional skin of Claire, carrying her through battles, births, heartbreaks, and time itself. But behind the cameras, there was a constant strain. Costumes designed to mimic 18th century attire often meant heavy fabrics layered over corsets, leaving little room to breathe. Long days on set in Scottish rain and wind left the body fatigued. And while Balfe never complained publicly, she admitted that her spine and posture bore the weight of those years. So, when Outlander finally began to wind down, the timing was fortuitous. She was ready, not only for new roles, but for a new physical chapter. Undoing corset damage, she half-joked, was part of the appeal of boxing. But underneath the humor was truth. Her body had been shaped by the demands of one role, and now it was time to reshape it on her own terms. A star in transition. For actors, the end of a long-running show can be both liberating and daunting. Audiences often struggle to separate the performer from the role. Balfe, however, leaned into reinvention. Choosing The Cut was strategic. Not only was it a very different kind of story, but it also allowed her to explore physical training in a fresh way. Her character, Caitlin, is not a fighter herself, but is intimately tied to the world of fighting. To portray her convincingly, Balfe knew she needed to feel the atmosphere of the gym, the sweat, the cadence of pads hitting gloves, the rituals that surround fighters' preparation. Boxing wasn't cosmetic, it was immersive research. Unlike gym machines or repetitive studio workouts, boxing is dynamic. It requires full engagement, legs, arms, core, and most importantly, the mind. Balfe quickly realized this was no fitness fad, but a discipline in its own right. Your brain can't wander, she said. Every second you lose focus, you feel it. It's both exhausting and exhilarating. Perhaps the most surprising outcome of her training was the mental clarity it offered. Boxing is often described as chess with fists, and even in training, that strategic element is present. Each movement is a decision, each response a recalibration. Balfe compared it to meditation, the necessity of being fully present, of listening to rhythm and breath, of letting go of outside distractions. For someone used to juggling scripts, sets, and family life, boxing became an unlikely sanctuary. Gender, perception, and power. When Balfe first posted glimpses of her training online, reactions were swift. Some fans were thrilled to see her in gloves, finding it empowering. Others were surprised. Wasn't boxing too brutal for someone known for elegance and grace? Her response, implicit and explicit, was to push back against those assumptions. Boxing wasn't about violence for her, it was about discipline. It was about breaking free from narrow expectations of how a woman should train, look, or move. In this way, her journey touches on a larger conversation, the way women are increasingly reclaiming spaces like the boxing gym, redefining fitness not as shrinking themselves, but as expanding their capacity for power and resilience. Orlando Bloom and the extremes of transformation. Working opposite Orlando Bloom, who underwent dramatic physical transformations for the film, highlighted the spectrum of approaches to getting into shape. Bloom lost and regained large amounts of weight, embodying the obsession and instability of a boxer past his prime. Balfe's steadier path stood in contrast. She didn't need extremes, she needed authenticity. While Bloom's body told the story of desperation, Balfe's conveyed quiet strength and constancy. Together, they created a visual and emotional balance in The Cut, the fighter unraveling, and the partner holding ground. Fans and the end of Claire Fraser. Another dimension of her physical reinvention lies in timing. As Outlander moves toward its finale, fans are grieving the end of an era. Balfe's embrace of boxing became symbolic for many, a reminder that endings can also be beginnings, that resilience means adapting, not clinging. Social media threads often juxtapose images of Claire Fraser with images of Balfe in the gym, highlighting the transformation. One fan wrote, "She fought through time in corsets. Now she fights through sweat in gloves. Always a warrior, just in different arenas." The broader cultural moment. Balfe's boxing journey also lands at a cultural moment when functional training is replacing aesthetics as the fitness ideal. Where once getting into shape in Hollywood meant sculpted abs and strict diets, today's actors are more likely to talk about strength, agility, and sustainability. In that sense, she's part of a new wave. Actors who train for skill, not spectacle. It mirrors shifts in public attitudes as well. Boxing and martial arts gyms have surged in popularity, especially among women seeking empowerment. Balfe didn't just follow a trend, she embodied it. What makes her story even more compelling is that boxing didn't end with the film. Balfe has said she continues to train when she can, even in breaks between projects. It's become part of her life, something she turns to for energy, for grounding, for a reminder of strength. This continuity underscores the deeper impact of the journey. It wasn't just preparation for a role, it was transformation for herself. The shape of what's next. Caitríona Balfe's fighting shape isn't the shape fans might have expected. It's not the starved look of a crash diet, nor the glossy sheen of a quick Hollywood transformation. It's the shape of resilience, rhythm, and renewal. As she closes one chapter with Outlander and opens another with The Cut, her boxing journey offers a lesson far beyond film, that true strength is not about looking a certain way, but about moving, breathing, and showing up with focus and courage. In the end, Balfe didn't get into fighting shape to fight anyone. She got into fighting shape to rediscover herself. And in doing so, she's inspired countless fans to consider what their own version of fighting shape might be.